Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Mehdi Hasan and Hasan Minhaj had this conversation, kind of a collab between Zateo and this latest issue of what Hasan Minhaj is doing ever since he kind of got back into the scene. And he's got a huge audience still, as does Zateo, building up quite a prominent audience. So they were having this conversation about all sorts of politics, and Tucker Carlson came up, and there was sort of an interesting tone to the conversation because, you know, familiar points were hit about him in discussing him, but Mehdi says that he gets asked about Tucker Carlson all the time and essentially hounded by people to talk to him, or when are they going to have a conversation. So interesting, I think, reference point in terms of how Tucker has captured a lot of space when it comes to the Israel criticism, and the fact that through that issue, his prominence is coming back to the place that it was when he was at Fox News in a way that he really hasn't been at since then. You know, Tucker was this kind of ubiquitous cultural force when he was at the main spot of Fox's nighttime programming. But ever since then, he's been a little bit more, you know, this like sort of folksy, not worried about the prime time type of figure. And through this criticism of the administration that he's doing, he's kind of reemerging as one of the more prominent people on the right. So I want to get into the trajectory of that, as well as what Mehdi says here about whether or not he wants to talk to Tucker. So here's that.
One person who's been very vocal on this issue recently in regards to Gaza is Tucker Carlson. Yes. You retweeted this interview last month with The Economist. Now, I have to show you the graphic because you retweet a lot.
I do, but this one I remember.
Okay. In addition to this retweet, is there any other background you want to give your followers about Tucker Carlson?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I've been very critical of Tucker Carlson over the years. And for the people watching at home, these days Tucker Carlson has a big fan base amongst the anti-war left, who see him as saying the right stuff, trying to stop Trump from illegal wars in Iran, and amongst a lot of Muslims and Arab Americans who see him now as this great champion of Palestine. Wherever I go, literally, Hassan, wherever I go in this country, I do a lot of live events. I do a lot of public events. People come up to me, when are you going on Tucker Carlson? When are you going to do an event with Tucker Carlson? Why don't you do a collab with Tucker Carlson? We love Tucker Carlson. Wherever I go, people ask me more about Tucker Carlson, even in my own family, than they ask me about my wife and kids. So I find myself in this difficult position. I find myself straddling this weird divide, this insider-outsider divide. The insider in me gets why we shouldn't like Tucker Carlson. He said some horrific things over the years about immigrants, about Muslims, about all sorts of people.
Great replacement theory.
Great replacement theory, which is anti-Semitic theory. Also, we go through the list.
Yeah. The election was stolen.
The election was stolen. Right. January 6th was a Fedsurrection. All sorts of nonsense. I did a 25-minute video, I think, about Tucker Carlson when I was at MSNBC, just doing a debunking of all his lies. Right? So I have a long memory. I'm cursed with a long memory, unlike a lot of Americans. So I remember all this shit. And then, obviously, I'm aware of, you know, how people operate in this space. A lot of it is for clicks or, you know, attention, etc. So I'm that's the insider in me sees Tucker Carlson, says, oh, I know what he's doing, and I remember who he is. The outsider in me says, you know what? Our media is so broken. Tucker Carlson's saying what a lot of mainstream media are not saying. And do I like Tucker Carlson? Not personally. Does he like me? I've heard he doesn't like me. But he's saying what needs to be said. And he's saying things that other people aren't saying. And he's taking on people on his own side. Remember, that's a key point, right? People in America love it when you take on your own side.
How do you make sense of the accusation that people may say that you're sane-washing Tucker Carlson, the same way people accuse the mainstream media of quote-unquote normalizing or sane-washing Donald Trump?
The difference is the word sane with Trump is relevant, right? He says insane shit, and then they tidy it up, the media. That's sane-washing. Tucker's not insane. The issue with Tucker is, are you normalizing some of his other bigotry, right? And that is a legitimate question. There are a lot of people who are uncomfortable and wonder about the agenda. Is he speaking out in Israel-Palestine? And I don't know the answer to this question, but I can understand why people raise this question. Is he speaking about Israel-Palestine because he's genuinely now revulsed by war? He's anti-war. He's a kind of old-school Pat Buchanan isolationist Republican. Or is he speaking out because he's anti-Semite and doesn't like Jews and doesn't like Israel? People level this at Candace Owens. Legitimately, she says some crazy shit about synagogues and Satan and other things and Hitler. Is that the case with Tucker? Is that the case with Marjorie Taylor Greene? When it comes to far-right conservatives and their opposition to Israel, a lot of people are nervous because we want allies, right? We're so used to being in a minority, those of us who've been pushing the pro-Palestinian cause in media and politics. We want allies. But are these the right allies? Do they have the same intentions as us? The only thing I noticed about Tucker Carlson is whenever he talks about Gaza, he talks about Christians in Gaza. He talks about churches being bombed in Gaza outrageously. Okay, but mosques are as well. That we should condemn that too. I saw him speak recently about Lebanese Christians being killed, which is outrageous. But how about Lebanese Shias or Lebanese Sunnis? So my worry is that, if, do we get into bed with Christian nationalists because right now we have a common enemy? I've never been of the school of thought, Hassan, of my enemy's enemy is my friend. I just think that's too cynical a worldview. I think we have to be principled and consistent.
How do you, as someone who speaks in a British accent and speaks very quickly, which makes you very talented in the media space, how do you then engage with Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, or Nick Fuentes? If they offered you to come on their podcast, would you?
Well, definitely not Nick Fuentes. And I have been asked to go on I've been asked to do stuff with Candace. I've said no. Tucker Carlson has not invited me on his show. I would love to have him on my show so I could get to the bottom of some of these questions and ask him some tough questions about where is this all coming from? Where does this all go? Again, one of my other criticisms of these guys is they helped bring Trump, like Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, Candace. They're all now saying, oh my God, why is Trump in Iran? This is so bad. And then all these Muslims and leftists are like, yeah, they're speaking out. I want some accountability. They gave us Trump. We wouldn't have Trump term 2 were it not for Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, Candace, and the rest. So I want some accountability. Would I go on the shows? I don't know. At the moment, probably not. I understand the arguments. A lot of people come tell me, you should do it. You'll reach a new audience. But then there's other people who'll be very upset with me because they will legitimately say, are you mainstreaming their other views? Are you okay with their other views? I don't know the answer, Hassan. It's a really tough one because Gaza is a massive issue for me, as you know. Palestine's a big issue. Changing the consensus on Palestine is important to me. We need allies. But is there a way to do it with these people saying, okay, we all agree on this, we'll carry on disagreeing on everything else?
All right, so I have a lot of thoughts on this because in some ways I think it's kind of a no-brainer, especially with Mehdi saying that he has a bunch of people talking to him, people in his community, people in his family coming out of the woodwork, especially when he goes to events and goes and speaks, telling him that he should talk to Tucker Carlson. I think that is an indication that he should do it. So he says at the end there that he doesn't think he would go on Tucker's show. He would like to have Tucker on his own show so that he could ask him the questions that he wants to ask him. I think that at that point you might as well just have the conversation, especially like I said, if you're saying that people are hounding you for it, people that are like-minded or that you respect in some sense are wanting that conversation out of you, then it's probably worth having. And I would say that the best approach to something like that would be like Sam Cedar's approach. He'll go to the thing and have the conversation, but like he's not necessarily going to be polite about it, maybe enough to keep the train on the rails, but he's also going to be combative. And essentially, like as a matter of principle, if you're going to talk to somebody who has positioned themselves politically the way someone like Tucker Carlson has, not just having bad opinions, but kind of like degrading the quality of discourse in the country, then you shouldn't necessarily go easy on them. And it does change a little bit when you're talking about this thing about allying yourself with people, because it's different than if you're just going to have a debate with somebody. But essentially, if Mehdi's saying that I would have him on my show so I could grill him, you can grill him on his own show too. He said he's never been invited. He doesn't think Tucker Carlson likes him necessarily, but at the same time, sounds like there's some demand for this conversation. And so it could probably happen if Mehdi, expresses openness to it. But I doubt Tucker Carlson is going to be like, yeah, sure, I'll come on your show. I doubt that he wants to talk to him enough that he would do that. And he's probably like, well, if these leftists are going to be stubborn about, wanting to talk to me, then screw them. I don't need them because there's enough people on the right who agree with me, etc. Now, that being said, there are, as he points out, legitimate reasons not to do it. I guess I just think that based on the position he's at, the idea that he would be mainstreaming Tucker's views by having him on Zateo, I don't think is true. But more so, the question is, what would the outcome be of accepting and embracing this alliance of people who are breaking from Trump and criticizing him on war, some of which are calling for his impeachment, right? So that's a mutual goal that we can all say, well, if Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith want impeachment of Trump and are going to start beating that drum on the right, that's a good thing, and we could potentially coordinate to that end. And it seems like that's kind of what they're pointing towards, because there's not much else other than a run the next time around. There's not much else they could be angling for, and it seems like they're trying to set up the grounds for which Trump could be impeached over what they see as war crimes or whatever they view the justification as being. Now, there's a lot of opportunity there. However, that is where they are going to try to have leverage. So ultimately, the people like Tucker Carlson are aiming for that situation where inevitably more Democrats are going to get elected into Congress in this next sweep. We don't know how many yet, and it could be, a situation where the House can put up articles of impeachment and then Senate, still controlled by Republicans, has to vote on it. So in that situation, the Republicans who have turned on Trump now are going to have a lot of leverage. Whereas if Democrats completely sweep beyond the point where like John Fetterman or something would be the deciding vote, God forbid, then you don't really need the Tucker Carlsons, etc. So beyond hysteria or just general hatred of right-wingers, there is a realistic scenario here where people on the left team up with the Tucker Carlsonites to impeach Trump, get him out of power, and empower J.D. Vance at a time when J.D. Vance would still have a reasonable amount of time under Trump's initial term, and then also be going into the next election as the incumbent president with also the levers of power behind that very election, which would put J.D. Vance in a much better position to try to pull some kind of grand techno heist on the next election than Trump is in, because Trump has lost so much credibility on that, and it's geared up for such a fight on pretty well-trodden ground at this point. And so the ultimate power grab move on the part of Republicans could be to get Trump out of the way, get somebody like Vance in control so that he can kind of land the plane on this term and, in their view, hopefully retain power. Now, the reason that's a reasonable view of things is because it wouldn't be that far off from the type of collaboration between liberals and fascists that have led to fascists taking power in the past. If you team up with one person because you say, well, we got to get this person out of power, and you create a power vacuum, especially while Republicans are still at the helm, then you've empowered the flank of Republicans that would probably end up coalescing behind J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance is signaling to the media that he's against this and he thinks we're running out of weapons, etc. And he's been planting those stories in the media, even though he's still defending the war publicly, trying to do these talks. So he's kind of getting rat fucked by Trump being sent to do these impossible tasks and getting stamped with this Iran war that is obviously going to be the worst issue that they have on their hands going into the next two elections. So J.D. Vance being able to take advantage of an emerging Republican flank that is going against Trump, going against this war, and ends up getting Trump impeached, could then empower him more so to retain power under Republicans and continue the actual fascist consolidation of power, which all in all is falling apart under Trump. Doesn't mean I want to see Trump finish out his term, but what I want to see, if we're talking about an impeachment scenario, is the current Trump administration as it stands being completely disempowered, and only the Republicans that collaborate to the end of completely disempowering this current strand of Trumpism and Republicanism in the government. Only those Republicans should be the ones that are anywhere near the levers of power. And I don't know that that would include Tucker Carlson, because it would probably be more of the institutionalists. Now, that's just the ideal situation, and there's a real question about what the mechanisms of that would be. Do you impeach Donald Trump? Do you impeach both Donald Trump and Vance? I think that the consequences to this, wanton abuse of power should be really, really sweeping, and they should do everything they can to go after every single member of the cabinet. Now, they're going to do more if they gain more power. If they gain marginal power, they're only going to do what they can get away with, and that is when some kind of deal between Democrats and anti-Trump Republicans might emerge, if there's a realistic effort to get him impeached. But then that's just going to put Donald Trump in a position to negotiate with them, which is when we could see some movement from him on the issue of Israel. So either way, they have bought themselves some time with this Iran war, because they're operating under the cover of the chaos that America has created with Iran. But eventually, policy towards Israel in America is going to change. And like I said, if Republicans end up being important in the Senate machinations when it comes to impeachment in the next time around, that is probably going to be heavily surrounding Israel, particularly when it comes to the demands around that. So it'll be interesting to see how that whole thing takes shape. The last thing I'll say about Tucker, though, on the flip side of this, because I know I said Mehdi should talk to him, I just think it's right there. And probably the self-consciousness of, I shouldn't talk to this person, I shouldn't platform this person. I think it's not about that anymore, and it's more about if you're gonna have that conversation, are you prepared to meet the moment? I think that's really what it comes down to. And, you know, as far as sane washing Tucker Carlson, I do think he's fairly insane, actually. And I think that's part of the risk of not necessarily about being too forgiving, but assuming that people like Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan or others that might be criticizing Trump for this reason or that reason, that they really want the same outcomes that we do. Because if you listen to some of the other stuff that Tucker Carlson is saying, he's still wrapped up heavily in the Christian nationalism and the immigration conspiracies and tying it in with these narratives about demons. And I think that, you know, he seems to be one of these people that has more religious motivations behind his critique of Israel than most people on the left. And that same is true for Candace Owens, where it's like on a surface level, she's saying a lot of the same things that people are saying about Israel, which is good. But underlying that, the real reason that she believes Israel is motivated towards evil is because of these sort of religious narratives and having to do with worshiping different deities and that sort of thing. And I believe because of Tucker Carlson's past statements that is his main concern, is this stuff about demons and stuff. I mean, even in his recent tirade about Trump, everybody covered that he, you know, said, how dare Trump say this about Iran on Easter, about blowing up the entire civilization, and, you know, really took that moment to turn on him. But he also, a few moments earlier, was saying that as he watched Trump be inaugurated, he noticed that Trump didn't put his hand on the Bible. And he felt weird about it at the time, and now he even feels more weird about it. So, I mean, that is creating the religious justification. It's not just saying that I think Trump has lost his mind. I think he's a narcissist. I think he always wanted power for the wrong reasons. He's saying, I think this guy is like demonic and the Antichrist, etc. And so I think it's good for evangelicals to believe that. But if that's their justification for getting Trump out of power, and it's still a position where they would be in power if Trump were to be removed from power, which would be the case if Democrats had a narrow control or narrow influence in Congress, then, you know, that could put us in a dangerous position when it comes to negotiating with these people, you know, and would probably be worth it for the sake of Trump getting removed from office. I'd love to see that as much as anybody, but the question of what comes after that is relevant. And for people like J.D. Vance and Tucker Carlson to be the ones who are empowered on the other end, I think is definitely an outcome that we should try to avoid.